We're about as far from the glitz and glamour of Vegas as you could possibly get. A referee doesn't see much glamour in his lifetime, so how does a former official become a world-renowned expert on Elvis Presley and moreover write books authorised by Graceland on his idol? We're here to meet Trevor Simpson, who's called in to Preston North End's training ground, and boy does he have a story to tell. Trevor, it's got to be the most natural thing in the world, hasn't it? A Football League referee becoming an authorised author for Graceland and Elvis Presley. Just got to be the thing you normally do, isn't it?
It's quite a quirky thing, Alan, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing how it sort of all happened, really. But from being a Football League referee and sort of retiring eventually from my day job, I started writing books about music, and it sort of progressed from there. Yeah,
we're going to find out that route that you took and how that happened after we chat a little bit about your football career.
Right.
Because it's not really particularly known other than by your close colleagues in the football fraternity about this Elvis link, is it?
No, it's not. Going through football, there were quite a lot of players who shared the sort of common interest in rock and roll music, and in particular with Elvis. Frank Worthington, a great big Elvis fan, and whenever I was sort of in Frank's company as a manager at Tranmere Rovers or wherever, we always had a good chat about Elvis. So it was interesting how football and Elvis sort of merged together, really.
Yeah, you don't tend to think of football referees as being pop or rock music fans. You tend to think of them being maybe aficionados of classical music, shall we say, or being very boring.
Well, that might well fit the likes of David Ellery, but I can tell you there are quite a lot of us who really are into sort of, well, modern popular music in the era that we grew up in. So yeah. I think it's a natural interest, really.
Yeah. So your Football League career took you were in sort of going way back, really, weren't you? When did you start?
Well, I passed my referee's exam in 1966, the year we won the World Cup, and started refereeing on the local leagues, managed to get through sort of all the local leagues, onto the Northern Premier League, and then onto the Football League line. I got on the Football League line in '82, and then in the middle 2 years later in '84. And I was there until the Premier League started. My last game was Everton Queen's Park Rangers in the old First Division, the season before the Premier League started. But by then I'd reached the magical age of 49 and was forced to retire. So I never refereed in the Premier League.
You wouldn't have been forced to retire now,
no,
so you
no.
could have gone on. But
absolutely.
You then became a referee coach, and now of course you're a valued member of the Refcom team.
Yes.
You are the ref, and with your perspective going way back as it does that kind of help? I mean, the modern requirements of referees would appear to be quite different in the way that they go about it.
I'm sure they are, but I think all that experience, Alan, that you gain in your formative years, sort of going through all the various leagues, through the muck and bullets of your career, it does stand you in great stead for what we're doing now on Refcom and what I did as a referee coach. When I retired, I became a coach, along with Keith Hackett and the PGMOL, and that was terrific, working with younger referees and trying to give them some of that experience that you'd gained over all those years.
And you'd imagine there'd be no such thing as a professional referee coach in those days?
No, I never got assessed until I got on the Northern Premier League. I never had a written assessment from anybody. I was sort of watched by a couple of fellas hiding behind trees on local parks, pretending not to be there as I progressed through, but that was about it. Never had a written assessment until I got on the Northern Premier League.
So it must improve the lot of the modern referee that he's got that much assistance compared to you kind of blundering in the dark.
There's never been a better time to be a referee. With all the help and the advice that is available, if you can tap into that and sort of put that into your armoury of things that you need as a referee, there's never been a better time, certainly. My grandson is 17 and he's just passed his exam, and I'm helping him now at local park level, and it's fascinating to sort of see what goes on at that level.
Help, advice and a little thing called money.
Well, the money is now the big issue, isn't it, for referees, certainly in the Premier League. But I don't think any referee of my era did it for the money, Alan. We all did it because, well, I was a goalkeeper with Halifax Town. I was so good, I played in Halifax Town's reserve team. It was great, but when I got injured, I started refereeing as an extension to my involvement in football.
Yeah, you share that distinction with Mark Halsey, being a former goalkeeper. Football club goalkeeper.
Well, they say you've got to be a little crazy to be a goalkeeper, and maybe the same applies to being a referee, I don't know.
Well, to do both, you're certifiable, surely.
Yeah.
But you come from an era when referees had to have that varied lifestyle because it wasn't a full-time career.
Correct.
You had a job, I think, in a bank.
Yes, I did.
And yet you developed this third strand to your life. You had the work in the bank, the refereeing, and then came this man.
Mr.
And
Pressley.
I tell you what, I'm glad you've taken that from me because that is a weightlifter's technique. It's required to pick that up and hand it on.
Yeah, well, this is the first book I wrote about Elvis. It's all about his music, Alan. I'm not really into sort of the image. I'm very interested in how the songs were written, how they got pitched to Elvis, how he interpreted them in such an individual style and really changed popular music forever. John Lennon famously said in the 60s that without Elvis, there wouldn't have been the Beatles and popular music would just have drifted along. He was a revolution.
So let's go back to how this all started for you. This all started then, way back when you were presumably just a fan. No idea that you were going to end up writing about the legend.
Absolutely right. I think the first time I ever heard Elvis was on an old 78 record at school. 78. On a wet Wednesday when you were allowed to bring your records in, and somebody played Heartbreak Hotel, and we'd never heard anything like it. And when we looked on the label and it said Elvis Pressley, nobody was ever called Elvis Presley. All my mates were called Hitchcock or Smith or Jones or something. And we just couldn't believe it. And of course, remembering that you couldn't really hear the music, the BBC at that stage were not really into pop music. You had to go under the bedclothes with Radio Luxembourg and listen to the crackles and pops and hear pop music coming through that way. So it wasn't until Elvis really came into the cinemas that we saw him, saw what his music was like. And like many of my generation, I became a fan of the music.
Yeah, but you took it on so much further later on, which you couldn't have imagined at that time.
No.
So how on earth then did you go from being a fan to being an author on Elvis, authorised by Graceland?
Well, it all started when I retired from the job in the bank. I managed to get out when I was 55. They gave me a good package to get away from it all. And I started by writing a couple of little books about the local music scene in Halifax, called Small Town Saturday Night. And both those books, surprisingly, sold out. I self-published it, did a couple of thousand copies of each, and they sold out. I started then writing for a magazine called Essential Elvis about the music that I grew up with. And it was the editor who said, you know, Trev, you know so much about all this music, you really ought to get it together and write a book about Elvis. And that's how the idea came. So we approached Graceland and said, look, we've got this idea of Elvis, the best of British. Do you think it's worthy of doing? And in America they said, yeah, it'll be a history book. But Alan, I was there. It wasn't history like we know it, you know, when they were fighting in the war and all this. This, I was actually there living it. And so I guess some of that came through in my enthusiasm for it all. And the first book was The Best of British, the HMV years, 1,700 copies worldwide, $125 each in America, 60 quid in England, sold out completely. So then they asked me to write a volume 2, and here I am on the treadmill with a volume 3 coming out next year.
So you've covered the years, what, 56 to 58, we've got another tome here. Well, that was just 57 to 58, that one.
Yeah, well, this is 2 years, 510 pages in this, a bit more sort of meaty in this one. And some of the things I discovered were fascinating. I mean, I'd heard jailhouse rock all my life. But I was in Chicago doing some sort of investigating about other things, and suddenly it came up that the people in jailhouse rock, for example, the whole rhythm section was the Purple Gang, were actually Detroit, Michigan mobsters who fought with Al Capone in Chicago. And I thought, I just wonder if there were any other people in the song of Jailhouse Rock that were real people. Went through all the lyrics and discovered all the people were real. And nobody in the Elvis world knew that until I discovered it. So maybe I am a historian after all, you know.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated that you as an Englishman should just go over there to Graceland and convince these high flyers, very wealthy people at this estate, that you should be writing their books. How on earth did you manage to do that?
It is quite remarkable, isn't it?
They got an American author.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think they'd seen my work writing for the Essential Elvis magazine. They realised that my style was very user-friendly, but not only that the depth of the information and the knowledge I had was something that maybe the Americans didn't have about the British aspect of Elvis. Remembering these books are called Elvis, the Best of British. And so it sort of mushroomed through two companies that Graceland are involved with. One is called Follow That Dream Records, and the other is Sony Music Enterprises, who, along with a company in Scandinavia who do the publishing called Flaming Star. Incidentally, Flaming Star and Follow That Dream were the titles of two Elvis movies, so that's where the company names came from. And so I went to Scandinavia, talked to the people about it all, and yeah, they said, let's go for it. And away we went.
It's going to keep you occupied for a few years. You've only got to 1960. You're bringing it all the way up to 1977, of course.
He died in 77. Who knows, Alan? I mean, each book is for 2 years. I've already finished the writing of the next volume up to 1960. But they did sort of hint that Elvis was a great gospel music fan, you know, too. And he recorded 100 gospel songs. And they've sort of hinted that maybe a book on the gospel music might be a sort of diversion to this Best of British. So we're in the lap of the gods on that one, we don't know.
You said something interesting before we started. You said that you're a great fan of the music, the Elvis music.
Yeah.
What was your feeling about the man?
Elvis as a man, I think his manager badly advised him. Initially, the manager did very, very well for him, but then he got on a treadmill of awful movies in the 60s, which he couldn't get out of the contracts. They were dire, they were quite dire, and I think maybe Elvis could have been a bit stronger. He could have said to his manager, I don't want to do it, I want to do something different, or even sacked his manager. But such was the power of Colonel Parker that this sort of relationship with Elvis, he was the dominant feature of it. Then he sort of went into Las Vegas, got back to live performing again, but after again a couple of years he maybe should have got off that and done something different. Barbra Streisand wanted him to play her leading man in A Star Is Born, the movie, and Parker wouldn't have it because Elvis would have to share billing with Barbra Streisand. So there were a lot of issues there. He got dissatisfied. I think he was caught in a trap, in the words of Suspicious Mind. He couldn't get out, and eventually it killed him. Prescription drugs and a lifestyle that wasn't good. He was staying up all night and sleeping in the day. So it was quite a sad story, unlike the music, which was a wonderful story.
And lives on and will live on forever.
Well, it's amazing. He would have been 80 this coming January, and it's going to be that he's been gone longer than he was alive in 2 or 3 more years' time. So, yeah, it is a legacy that he's left of this wonderful music.
And I lose count of the number of Elvis impersonators I've seen. I think I've seen one on every European holiday, at least one.
Yeah.
Are you an Elvis impersonator?
No, I wouldn't. In fact, whilst I do believe that they have a part to play in attracting younger people into the industry, I'm against them. Yeah, because there was nobody exactly like him. And all these guys can do is to hopefully attract people who weren't there at the beginning, didn't see it all happening, into liking the music. And that has a place. Yeah. But for me, I'm sorry, no.
Well, this is your tribute act.
Yeah, I guess it is, yeah.
Favourite song?
Oh, that's so difficult. I think the different Elvis songs for different moods. I think some of his ballads. He said he was never a good ballad singer, but he could sing ballads of the highest quality. Are You Lonesome Tonight? He could sing Suspicious Minds. He could sing rock and roll. He could sing gospel, rhythm and blues, country music. Whatever he wanted to sing, he had the natural talent to do that. He even played the piano. And not many people knew that, but I managed to go and meet his first cousin, who told me, and the story's in the book, where Elvis learned to play the piano. So the sort of book and the research has taken me all across America. I was in the University of Texas in Austin, and I found 15 demonstration records that songwriters had written for Elvis and pitched to him that nobody had ever seen before. So I have uncovered a lot of things that have become part of this legacy that I hope I'll be connected with, Alan, when I'm dead and gone, in the Elvis Presley music.
Yeah, Trevor, thank you ever so much. Who said refereeing was boring?
Refereeing's never been boring, Alan, has it? We've had a great time refereeing, and this moves on, doesn't it?
Thank you, Trevor.